All right, now looking at example 5, we have two examples to look at. It says determine the equation of the following function written in the form y is equal to, and we're familiar with that. So our job here is to look at the graph and then to determine what a, b, h, and k are. One thing to note is that it does say the equation, implying that there's only one. And to be honest with you, there is sometimes the a and the b, you can get more than one answer. I'll show you the way to get the simplest answer. So the regular graph here would look like, if you recall, a 0, 0 point and then the 1, 1 point. So the regular graph would start off and look like this, and then at the 4 and the 2. So if you kind of compare what happened with our parent graph, and what happened with this graph, we can figure it out. Well, the first thing I guess is kind of easy to see is that it shifted over, if you look at the origin, it shifted over to the left 3 and up 2. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to look at is that it went left 3 and up 2. So in other words, my h is going to be equal to negative 3 and my k is going to be equal to a positive 2. So that's pretty straightforward. The next one is to think about what is our a and our b. How did it stretch? Okay, so I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. So the important points I'm going to look at is the 0, 0 and our 1, 1. Okay, so it's kind of straightforward in that regularly this horizontal distance is just 1 and the vertical distance is just 1. Now they've actually made bold here two different points, and they just put the dots where they exactly hit the coordinates here. So looking at our image function, it looks to me like there's a horizontal distance here of 4. So looking at that 4, it seems to me then instead of the regular 1, the horizontal distance is now 4. So I realize that there has been a horizontal stretch of 4. So how do you have a horizontal stretch of 4? So in other words, all the x values have been multiplied by 4. So that tells me then my b has to be equal to 1 over 4 because it's always the reciprocal. Does that make sense? So in other words, now I know that b is going to be equal to 1/4. And what about my a value? So here vertically this is going to be just 1 and this is also just 1. Okay, so there has been no vertical stretch. So I'll say vertical stretch. You could call it a vertical stretch of just 1. So or I could say no stretch. So in other words, my a is equal to 1. So my a is equal to 1. Now, has there been any reflections? No, not really. It's going the same direction here. If I noticed, instead of going this way, it switched to that way, then I could say it was reflected on the y-axis. Or if it went, I'll just erase this one. If it went from that way and then later on went this way, it'd be reflection along the x-axis, so no reflections. So I look at all these things. I put a number 1 there. I guess this is number 2, the second thing I looked at. So no reflections. In other words, the a and the b are both positive. Okay. And now I'm ready to put it together. So if I've got all these values, here I'll put it right underneath here. I've got my h is equal to negative 3. So in other words, this is going to end up being x plus 3. My b value is 1/4. Oops. Hit that eraser. 1/4 here. It's still the square root. Since my a is 1, I don't really have to write a 1 out there. I'll just leave it. And then I've got my up 2, so my k is plus 2. And that's what it looks like. All right, let's take a look at our bottom example here. So first of all, it seems to me that the origin, it moved to the right 6 and down 5. So let's look at our shifts first. Looks like it went right 6 and down 4. So my h is going to be equal to 6 and my k is going to be equal to negative 4. Now we've got this point here and we've got this point here, and so on this one my x, here I'll zoom right in, my x is still a difference of 1, right? Still a difference of 1. So you remember that in the parent function between the 2 points, 4 and 2, between the first 2 points like this, there's also an x difference of just 1. Okay, so I know first of all there hasn't been any horizontal stretch. So looking number 2. Okay, so let's say no horizontal stretch. So I know that B, now it seems to me there is going to be a reflection, so I'm going to be very careful. I'm going to say the absolute value of B is equal to 1. I'm anticipating perhaps when I look at the reflection it may be negative 1, all right? But now let's look at it vertically. So vertically, here, this distance here, instead of being 1, this is a distance, well, it's between negative 4 and 0. This is 4, as opposed to originally, in the original function, it is 1. Okay, so in other words, there has been a vertical stretch of 4 by a factor of 4, so that I know that the absolute value of A is equal to 4. Okay, so we'll see which way the reflection was. Okay, now let's consider the reflection. So it was going up and to the right here, and now it's still going up, but it's going to the left. So if I started this way, and then if I did a reflection so it went that way, that would be a reflection on the y-axis. So there is a reflection over the y-axis. In other words, the x values are multiplied by negative 1. And the x values, that's the b. Okay, so b is going to be equal to, the absolute value of b was 1, and we weren't sure whether it was positive or negative 1. It will be a negative 1. Okay, so we have a is 4, and a is equal to 4. So there's no other reflection. If there was a reflection over the x-axis, so what does that look like? So if this is our original function, if there's a reflection over the x-axis, it goes down instead of up, right? That's the reflection over the x-axis, but it still goes up, right? If this was coming here and went downwards, then it would be reflection on both axes, and a would also be negative. So since there is, I'll write in here, no reflection over x-axis. So there we have it. So we can write out our final solution here. So starting with y is equal to a times, and how did they have it here? Did they put f of x or did they put the square root sign? But they put the square root sign, so the square root of b x minus h plus k, and we are aware that a is going to be equal to 4, so I'll say y is equal to 4, and then over here I'll say negative x. My h value was 6, so I say minus 6, and then my k is minus 4. And there would be my answer.